Hello and welcome to TelecomTV. We are at the Intel offices in the Georgian city of Bath in Somerset in England. It's coming up to Christmas. It's very jolly out there. There's a big Christmas market going on and we are in here, at least it's warm, and we're talking about MEC, Mobile Edge Computing. And I have three guests with me who are very knowledgeable on this pretty new subject, and I'm going to begin by introducing them. To my left, we have Dirk Lindemeier. Welcome, Dirk. In the middle is Mansoor Hanif, who is Director of Radio Access Networks and Programmes at EE. Also, welcome, Mansoor, and good to see you again. And finally, and last but by no means least, John Jadersten, who is the Technical Director of Infrastructure Sales for EMEA at Intel. So, gentlemen, welcome. We've got quite a lot to get through over the next few minutes, so let's get straight to it. I'll begin with you, John, if I might. Why MEC? What is MEC? It's a newish subject. A lot of people still, even within our industry, still don't know exactly what it is. Can you begin by explaining that and Intel's part in it?
Thank you. Let's start looking at this too. Mobile edge computing is really a transformational technology initiative that's coming together across the industry. What we see at Intel is that the requirements on the telecom network to handle data center-like workloads, data center type application types, data center type analytics is now needed more so than ever. What we see is that we are providing a fundamental technology from the data center edge out towards the telecom edge. That's really what this is, mobile edge computing. Move the edge of the data center to the edge of the telecom network and then drive a ecosystem of OEM partnerships, service provider partnerships, as well as ecosystem application development on top of this. Nothing that we drive alone, it's something that we inject our technology into to make innovation happen on top. We've seen this in many markets before, and we think the time is ripe now to take this to the telecom market, together with fellow travelers such as Dirk and Mansoor here.
Okay. Dirk, let's talk to you now. Why Nokia? Why is Nokia involved in this?
Well, Nokia is a mobile broadband specialist company, so we build mobile networks for our customers like EE. And we, of course, have a high interest in creating additional value with LTE networks in particular, which is right now forming the lion's share of what's being rolled out into live networks. And we saw an opportunity back in 2013 to actually plug some additional intelligence into these base stations, which form the edge of a network from a mobile network's standpoint. And we did that, and we announced it together with Intel. But back then in 2013, it was really a bit of a Nokia-specific thing. So we called it Liquid Applications and got a lot of interest for it. But then very soon, people started to realize that rarely is a network built exclusively from Nokia kit. So we said, okay, we have to make it an industry standard. And this is really what MEC, Mobile Edge Computing, is all about. It's kind of generalizing and standardizing this initial concept, which we made a product now into an industry standard.
Okay, thank you. Mansoor, you are the sole representative here of the service providers. Why is MEC of particular interest to you?
Well, it's of huge interest to us because we all know that the edge is going further and further into people's lives, the edge of the network. Mm-hmm. A few years ago, everybody had big rooftop radio sites, macro sites, and now we're going into small cells, we're going into femto cells, we're going into business areas, corporate areas. So our network is growing, into the areas where people need it most. So the edge is growing, actually. And actually what that means is that there's a huge opportunity there. By actually doing the computing at the edge of the network, you can really improve the customer experience. By doing it there's no need to bring it all the way back to the center of the network and compute and bring it back. So you can improve the experience for the customers, but also by adapting the content that you are providing at the edge of the network to the local specifics, for example, a shopping center or a corporate location or a railway station, you can actually provide a lot of benefit to the users themselves. So I think it's a very exciting prospect.
Okay, thank you. Another question is, why are we doing it here? I mean, it's a nice place to be. Bath's a nice city, lovely city. But why here rather than anywhere else? Is there a particular reason? To
Intel, the whole area around Bath, Bristol, Swindon along the M4 is a hotbed of innovation, technology companies, and in particular, as you look at the RAN side of the telecom network, there is software development, hardware development, ranging from a long history of high-tech companies in this area, and that's from our vantage point a natural place why we wanted to put the collaboration lab here.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, for the whole of the M4 corridor is becoming a real hotbed of innovation. So we have a very big office in Bristol. A lot of my engineering team is based there, which is very nearby.
Mm-hmm.
We know of a lot of our partners based in Swindon and all across the M4 corridor into London. It's something that a lot of developers are growing into that area. So I think it's the right place to be for this type of innovation. If you look at Bath itself, I went down to the Roman ruins in Bath city centre, and it's very interesting to walk around there, and you see a lot of inscriptions from people in Roman times. And what's really interesting is Bath was always a hotbed of bringing people together, and the gravestones I saw there, or the inscriptions, were from Dalmatia, from Italy, from all over Europe. So it's always been a centre of drawing the best people from around the world, in my view.
Very nicely put. Dirk, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, we generally like to drive innovation close to where our customers are sitting, and with this new mobile edge computing approach, we really picked a very few leading operators that want to innovate and want to be part of the disruption that MEC is actually causing, and as such, EE was a perfect choice for us. And doing it in Bath, of course, in your home country is just very natural to do.
Let's move on. A few years ago, as you will all remember, every comms industry business in the world, or many of them, had one story, which is, come to us. We are a one-stop shop for everything you're ever going to need. Come to us, we're going to sell it to you, we'll arrange it all, we'll do it. Those days have gone. This is no longer the case. There has come a realization that in this quickly changing world, no one company can do it all. And the emphasis these days is very much on a sort of cooperative ecosystem. How do you begin by building the ecosystem for MEC? Where does it start, and how do you hope it will develop? I don't know who would like to answer first, whoever.
Maybe I can take this. So
yeah, sure.
Basically, it all starts with the way MEC is set up in terms of what are we actually standardizing. So if you little bit zoom into the objectives of MEC, it's not about standardizing the form factor, the amount of CPU or memory we're putting into these distributed servers, but it's all about standardizing an environment that applications can land onto these base stations regardless of who the base station vendor is. So is it a Nokia base station or is it from somebody else? Doesn't really matter after MEC. So the way it's set up, it's really meant for openness, and it's meant to hide the multi-vendor reality that is simply there in networks today. So really, what this means is that we are opening up the base station for the very purpose of inviting partners to develop on it, and that's something extremely radical. So had you asked that question maybe 2 or 3 years ago, would we ever open up the base station and have it provide APIs? Absolutely not. So it has been a very, if not the closest environment of the entire mobile network. And that's the main thing. We are opening it up and we are inviting partners to the activity here to actually come and
what caused that sea change? What caused you to change your policy? And we know you said, no, we're not doing this. This is our secret. Why did you change your mind?
Because we told them to.
Well, this is it. Exactly. My point I was going to make, Mansoor, and you can confirm this for me, is, as we've seen with SDN and NFV, of course, it's been the service providers themselves who have put pressure on the manufacturers and vendors to change things.
Well, I was only joking, really, but yeah, I think Dirk put it very well. I mean, we've had a lot of conversations about liquid. I've loved the concept of liquid apps since the moment I heard about it. But the thing that held me back was always the same. And I told your teams, I need something I can roll out over the whole network, and therefore we need to find a solution so that it can be multi-vendor. And I think you were thinking the same way anyway, because what you said is very clear. So the whole of the mobile edge computing initiative is about getting that multi-vendor, and we're actually quite lucky because most of the key vendors who work with us are part of it. Not everybody's part of it, so it's a very good opportunity for us in particular to build something that we could possibly roll out over the whole network, and that increases the opportunity for the application developers and for all our partners. I think if you've got the opportunity of rolling out applications across the whole of a country, a big country like the UK, and you have a service provider like ourselves who are passionate about it and are ready to push that through. I think for some of the big partners around the world who are looking to try their first experience of this, it's quite an enticing prospect, I think. No?
Yeah, absolutely, and even more so, it's this base station. Yes, it has been a closed environment for a long time, but there is additional things we can do for it. Because if we are completely honest with ourselves as an industry, this thing, as sophisticated as it is, it has really been serving one single purpose all those years, and that is forwarding data from left to right. And we thought there's definitely much more we can do with these locations, with the extreme proximity to the eyeball that this base station is by definition having, and that's something we wanted to really unleash and do more with networks.
And it is very revolutionary, because I know a lot of my colleagues, I mean, I've been in the business 20 years, I know a lot of my colleagues still would treat me as a heretic by saying that we're going to open up the network, we're going to open up the APIs, we're going to allow this kind of open sourced development platform. Now we need to be very careful about the quality, and that's why we need really good partners like Intel and Nokia to make sure it's done in the right way. But if it's done in the right way, the potential is huge. So I think we've got to open source our minds and change the way we think about this, because I think we've been looking at it the wrong way. If we want to entice the over-the-top players to come through the network, this is the best vehicle.
Okay, John, you wanted to get in?
Yeah, lovely discussion indeed. From an architecture perspective, we've also seen this in other industries. Once you decide to open it up, you have to identify standards, agree on what those rules of engagement are, but then innovation speed picks up really, really fast. So openness is the key. And I do think that we can learn a little bit from the past as well, where we have done this in other industries, such as the data center, the enterprise and cloud build-out that's going on there. We're now moving that capability to the edge of the network, so similar rules will apply. So we have a lot to learn from the past here that we can benefit from as well.
So we have an ecosystem that's building. You are in partnership. What about standards? You mentioned open, you mentioned standards. One of the things that we've seen also, referring back to SD and NFV, is this concept of openness is great, but how far does it go? When you're talking about open for MEC, how open actually is it, John?
It needs to be so open that multiple OEMs can participate. Just like Dirk said, this is not limited to a Nokia brand. That does not mean open. It needs to be able to be deployed from various operators, regardless of what their base invested architecture is. So adopted. I think most importantly on the software side, it needs to be very well defined what the software APIs are for the software vendors to deploy on top. And again, these companies have participated in this in the past. We have participated in it, so we can do this again. But openness means truly open on all aspects: OEM, service provider, and ecosystem side. And that's what we have to sit around the table and define exactly what that looks like.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. My next question following on from that is, how do you define that openness? Dirk, what does that mean to you? It's an easy phrase.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, from the way MEC, the standards are going to be set up, it is of course open. Where we have to be a little bit careful is that we don't make this, have people get the impression that this is just another data center, another cloud that applications can be deployed into. Not because it wouldn't be possible from a technology perspective, because it is very alike to what we see in data centers today. But of course, the resources at the edge of a network are somewhat precious. So many functions that are residing in cloud today would reside there also in future. So we have to be a little bit, I would say, clever to select the right applications to put onto the base stations for several reasons. And what we have done is we have developed a small methodology for identifying which really are the ones that benefit most from sitting at the edge, and then also which are the ones that deliver the greatest value, because there is an incremental investment. Let's make that clear as well, and operators have to recoup that eventually. So we have to really handpick the right applications to go there, and that requires a bit of thinking. So it's not just another cloud, it's a highly distributed cloud with some particularities in it, and that's of course a process we have to educate developers into, that they don't start putting everything onto these servers, because some things are very well suited for the cloud also in the future.
Okay, Mansoor, as an operator, you've been listening to this. What do you make of that sort of approach to openness? Is it Does it chime with what you want to do within EE?
Yes, it does. I mean, it's very much in line with our thinking. From our point of view, the most critical points are that a common definition of the APIs that are used into and out of the base stations, so that we can make sure that we have a common capability across all our vendors. So I think there's a lot of work around that in terms of defining exactly which parameters are coming in, which parameters are coming out, and how they're defined.
Mm-hmm.
And also a common platform where the intelligence of this solution can be made available to any developers, from the ecosystem, especially here in the UK, in a common way, through the way they interface with those APIs. So it's exactly what we're looking for.
Let's move on to standards, if we might. We've talked about open. Open implies standardization in some way or another. What about the standards themselves? I know that MEC is involved in the ETSI processes and ISG and ISG on the. What does it mean? How does that involvement with a body such as ETSI help or hinder or further enable?
Yeah, so it was a very conscious decision to put this under ETSI. We are a little bit trying to replicate the success of ETSI NFV. Mm-hmm. It wasn't completely fitting into ETSI NFV, so we decided to make it a separate ISG, namely the ETSI MEC. But sort of the working principles, the support we are getting from ETSI, all these kind of logistics around it, actually, they are very much the same as they are with ETSI NFV. So it was a easy decision to go that way. We started with 6 founding members. Now we are already at 20, I believe, with 10 more in the process of joining, and that only like a month after we have announced the entire thing. So I think by having it hosted in ETSI, we first of all make it easy for companies to join, as they know ETSI, they know NFV, so it's kind of an easy thing. And secondly, we kind of ensure that we got a good mix of participants. So if you look at the mix of founding members, there were like 2 system vendors like us and 2 operators like EE, and then 2 kind of IT giants in there. And now we see several independent software vendors queuing up to actually join as well. So we want to have this mix of network infrastructure and technology vendors, operators, the ones who would actually put this into the network, and then thirdly, the ones that we want to populate the platform with, so ISVs, OTTs, ASPs, I mean everyone, sorry, many acronyms. Anyone who has an application that should land on the platform. That's the kind of mix we want, and for that actually, ETSI is a good ground, much more than 3GPP maybe.
Well, the ETSI NFV has been a remarkable runaway success, as we've all seen. Astonishing. I've never seen anything like it in all my time in the industry. So if you can get anywhere near that with MEC, you'll be doing tremendously well. John, you wanted to come in on that just then.
My reflection is just the numbers and how fast it moves. 5 members will not do it. The 20 will give you the critical mass to start moving this mountain much faster than we have seen in the past. So I think it's certainly on par with the ETSI and NFV push that we saw earlier, indeed.
And what's the ultimate aim under ETSI? How big do you want to get? Are you going to close your membership in due course? Or how enormous do you want it to be?
How enormous? That was an enormous question. To be honest, I don't have a strong point of view. I mean, my vision would be, a year out from now, I'd like to see 100, if not more, active, ISVs developing on top of this vibrant ecosystem. I'd like to see, more hardware innovation going into it. I would like to see, refreshed intertechnology going into this as well, because that's another value of deploying on standard architectures, that you can benefit from, the Moore's law and the evolution of this. So I see that being picked up by our OEM customers in this case. I want to see service providers explaining how this drives, revenue benefits to them, new revenue streams, new business opportunities, so they can invest in this technology. I can't define an endpoint now. We're at the starting line, and we're moving fast on it. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think, generally, from my point of view, because it's a little bit special for us, because we normally go through our shareholders, France Telecom, Deutsche Telekom, Orange and Deutsche Telekom. But in this case, we joined directly as EE because it's so close to our hearts, really. And I think, generally speaking, the more the merrier. But with the caveat, which is that, let's not get bogged down by bureaucracy and ratification of this or that. And if it gets too big and too bureaucratic, that's the day we'll leave.
Always a problem, isn't it?
So
The
as
perennial problem.
long as we're moving at a good speed and there's good alignment and maybe being led by a few of the more pioneering operators or vendors, then I think the more the merrier.
Let's move on again and look at something the real nitty-gritty, apart from the technology, money, finance. None of this is free, nothing comes free. There are all sorts of requirements that you, Mansoor, and the operators have. You want to make a return on investment as quickly as you can by introducing new services and applications, of course. What sort of cost are we talking about for a service provider like you to take on MEC, to deploy it and to use it? How long will it take, and what do you expect to get out of it in the short and medium term?
It's a very significant investment because we would need to upgrade all of our base stations. So it's something that we've made it very clear to our partners that the business case is just based around optimizing our network will not fly on their own. To get this across the board with our investors and our shareholders, we need to be showing the uplift in revenue as well. So if you got the uplift in revenue plus the optimization of the actual quality of the network together, then I think that's a compelling business case, because as we know today, especially in Europe, revenues are flat at best, and it's a very competitive environment. So I think we're all looking for that golden formula to increase our revenues, and I think this MEC provides that potentially. I think there's a lot of third parties who are willing to invest if they can see that this will be rolled out on a big scale, and it can provide opportunities for them to improve the quality of service for their customers, or they can resell it to other customers. This is where I'm really excited, because I think that from my point of view, I'd like to show those use cases to generate new revenues as well as optimize the costs, bring it to our management, and then even if it's a big investment, that's something that we can definitely look at. Okay. But it needs to give both revenues and cost reduction.
Now, gentlemen, as members of the other side of the fence on this, as vendors and manufacturers, what do you say in response to that? How do you see the cost of upgrading these networks in this way? Is it going to be difficult? Is it going to put people off? Or do you think it's an absolute necessity for the networks going forwards? I don't know who wants to answer first, whoever you like, but...
Yeah, maybe I can start. So first of all, it's the important thing to understand is that this does not require to virtualize the entire radio access network, which was the very initial perception that people thought, okay, now applications are coming into the RAN, so first I have to redesign the entire network. Not the case. I mean, the whole idea is that we add this to existing LTE networks. So that's the first thing. It's an incremental upgrade. It's kind of an applications overlay, if you will. Then secondly, of course, we are trying to optimize the cost of the product itself. And of course, Intel is very instrumental in that, in terms of helping us to reach a volume and drive component prices to where they should be driven towards to. Very important. That's the product cost. So that, like any other base station component, we have to make sure that the cost is continuously eroding downwards. And then thirdly, there is this aspect of making the deployment easy. And what we realized is that a lot of network build, which is still happening, can be utilized as a vehicle for actually getting the service out as well. So from that point of view, it is just another base station component, so it doesn't require an additional cabinet or any particular skills from a technician who is installing it. It's kind of pre-configured in the base station if the base station happens to be a new one, and just being deployed together with the base station. So that's the way how we can manage the cost portion of it, but I completely agree with Mansoor. That's not enough. I mean, the revenue piece is as important.
But it's a good point, Dirk, in terms of the speed of rollout. I mean, once we have a management decision and the business case is there, it can be very fast. I mean, we're all struggling to roll out the new frequency bands on LTE. That takes a lot of antenna work, rigging work, a lot of permits, and that's very, very slow upgrade compared to this type of upgrade, which would basically be a board within the base station, and could be done in theory. We have 8,500 base stations, so it could be done within a year or two. Within a year or two on the whole.
John.
I think it's the realization that this is really a new network capability that's being put in place, and innovation will start happening on top of that. I know, Dirk, you've shared with me as well, some use cases and data points that are coming back, which look very, very compelling to operate operators, but there's more to come on that. And with innovation, new applications being put on here, we will find new business cases as well. Not everything is developed out the chute. We are starting here, and we have some good fundamental use cases that have been tested and proven, and that we are communicating around. But there's more to come on that line.
Totally agree with John. I think today we're just really scratching the surface. We're just beginning, So the use cases are going to explode as more and more of these companies come on board. So I think we're just at the beginning of this at the moment. So I think it's gonna grow huge very quickly.
Another question to you, something we haven't mentioned up until now, of course, is the ultimate end user, your customer, Mansoor. I can see, gentlemen, that you are happy to be doing this because it's new technology, it's a revenue earning opportunity. Same for you, Mansoor. What about the ultimate guy down the road there? What is he going to get out of it, she or them?
I think, if you look at our customers in two broad categories, the corporate customers and the consumers, I think initially the corporate customers are the ones who are going to get the first benefits. There's a whole new app ecosystem which is built around having a really low latency. And depending on the location of where we'll be rolling this out, we can give benefits to their business models by improving the latency, but also by adapting the content to the location. So for example, shopping, gaming, live gaming. In shopping centers, for example, you could be adapting the content regularly. You could, for example, install, it's one of the use cases we're looking at, in a shopping center. You could install this in the indoor installations and have adapted content being updated into the base stations every day by actually adapting the content to the footfall, and also providing people information that they need while they're there, combining the added precision on mobility to the actual specific location itself. The same thing for railway stations, the same thing for roads and motorways, and in particular for video content. For our corporate customers, for example, a lot of the broadcasters, they're very keen to be able to measure the quality of the video, and people like Netflix or any of the broadcasters, they're all very keen to make sure they are putting out the best quality of the video. And through one of the use cases of Liquid Apps, we can provide them quality assurance and optimization of that video experience.
John, do you have any concrete examples you can tell us about?
Well, I have some concrete problems, right? With we all can relate to children in the back seat wanting to watch their high definition video downloads and screaming for more and more bandwidth. I think with the help of location-based services, predictable placement of content down the road, because we know how fast that car is going, where it's headed, we can preload content down the road and give them a fantastic high definition experience and less shouting in the car. To me, that's a promise that I hope to see come true with this sort of technology.
And Dirk?
Yeah, and even beyond the shouting kids on the back seat, there's this whole new space of Internet of Things which is out there, and where I think many people have been scratching their heads. So how can we really make that happen? If we look a little bit closer, we will find out that many of these objects, and there are many billions of these objects out there, will generate a sizable amount of data, and much of that data would first hit the network at the base station. So it makes complete sense to actually catch it there and pre-process it there to, first of all, limit the ingress bandwidth to the cloud, which can be very substantial, as we have seen, and secondly, enable some real low latency decision making based on the analysis. So what we had shown in Barcelona this year was video surveillance as an example. So what we've seen is that by analyzing the camera feeds at the base station, we can take out some 95% of the raw traffic, and therewith really thin out the amount that goes further into the cloud for further analysis. And we can come to quicker decisions, we can come to quicker insights based on that data and take action on it. So very easy example, and I think only with edge computing really many of these IoT use cases will make sense and will be implementable. I just heard last week that even a cow today is generating 200 megabyte of data every year just by some health monitoring. Now, I don't know how many cows we have in the world, but if already cows generating 200 megs, then what's next? And we need this distributed computing approach for handling all these objects or animals in that.
Yeah, I mean, as we go into the future, then we'll have more exotic use cases where actually, in a controlled environment, in an indoor environment, you could even have the users controlling the physical characteristics of the base station, changing the antennas, tilting, orienting the antennas, changing the coverage. So you could use that to allow the user to adapt the coverage in an indoor installation themselves, and they might want to, on a certain day, have it covering a certain part of the building, and the next day another part of the building. Why not? If it's a corporate building or if it's a shopping center, we should be allowing that flexibility in the future. Or even for gaming, for example, you could use the network characteristics could be controlled by the gamers to be able to control, for example, I don't know, gaming robots or to bring games alive. So that's more exotic. That's coming in the future. But all we need is the creative types to come along, think about that, and what would they do with the network if they had it in their hands.
To me, another use case that I'm dreaming about solving here is also the one of battery life, which is the other thing the backseat passengers are complaining about. I think with rightly deployed, this will allow you to be very efficient in your upload. Be very, very fast to upload stuff. Let your client device go back to power saving mode, and hence give you a longer battery life experience as well. It's easy to forget about these things. We're all about great consumption, but it's actually how the whole device can be improved thanks to how the network technology is implemented. People tend to forget about that, but the network helps your device experience, improve dramatically as well.
Okay, final question. We're down to our last minute, believe it or not, already. What about the developers? You've mentioned these a couple of times. If you give a short, sharp answer to this, if you would, each of you. What about the developers? They're all important, as you've said. How are they going to go about getting their hands on the platform and begin designing and writing apps? I mean, the software market here is going to be particularly important, as we know. So how are you going to do it?
Well, the Bath facility is a very important stepping stone for developers to come in. So we are bringing the platform to where the developers are. Basically, what they'll recognize is a platform that looks very similar to a data center with some specialities, which are simply due to the fact that the server sits inside the base station. But with regards to API descriptions, their ability to bring the host OS together with the application deployed inside a virtual machine, all these kind of things are not telecom specific. That's very much data center or private cloud-like technology. So they'll find something very similar to what they have been using in the past. And we invite them to come here, not only to Bath, but also to other such places that we hope we can actually open up to be where they are and benefit from their innovation and inspiration.
Thank you, John.
So that's fantastic, and that's what we want this Bath Center to be able to do. From an Intel vantage point, we are also developing, or we've started a developer community called the Intel Networks Builders, which is another way for software companies to come together, compare notes, learn from one another, listen to each other on optimizations and making sure that they are on the latest, software revisions and so forth, and draw benefits from one another. And those have really been hotbed for innovation conversations on top of this type of platform. So I foresee that happening continuously throughout 2015 and onwards as well. These kind of software ecosystem gatherings to draw from each other.
Thank you. Mansoor, the last words with you.
I think the two ways really. First of all, we'll be listening to our partners, and when you say you've got interesting partners that you'd like us to meet, we'll be more than happy to do that. But at the same time, I think what we'll be doing is we'll be organizing some open days, specifically for EE here, together with Nokia and Intel, where we'd bring some of our corporate customers who are interested in some of the developments here, and some of our corporate developers who work on our app ecosystem, to bring them together here to have a look at the possibilities here and basically to see what they'd like to contribute.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, very much indeed. We're out of time. Half hour's gone pretty quickly, sat here. All it remains for me to do is to thank Intel for hosting us here in their offices in Bath, in Somerset, in cold England, and to thank my panel, and to thank you for watching. Goodbye for now.